How are you guys doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, and today is December 11th. Not a lot of big game news or anything like that, but a lot of just circling news around some pretty big figures and some pretty big teams in the NFL. I don't think we can go much further than all the news surrounding Bill Belichick and how close he actually is to becoming the head coach of the University of North Carolina. It doesn't even sound like an actual thing that's happening, but according to multiple reports that I've seen, it's very close to being done, but I haven't seen an official, statement as of recording this show. So we're going to talk about that and, how Bill Belichick, reacted to it a couple days ago, while also bringing up topics like the quarterback situation in Atlanta with Michael Penix potentially starting to get a lot more support for him to start over Kirk Cousins. We're going to talk about that and whether that would be the right move or not, while also reacting to the second episode of Hard Knocks in the AFC North that dropped last night. So those are only a few things that we're going to talk about as we go on through the show. But before we get started, if you guys ever want to get involved with the show, with any question or comment or just any opinion you want to share on anything we're talking about or anything related to the NFL in this segment, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input and your guys' thoughts always adds a lot to the conversation and the content we want to provide for you guys. So if you want to get involved, there's an easy way to do that. And if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out, please use the new Super Chat feature. The Super Chat feature is available to you guys just by clicking and that way it could bring us to different points of view from your guys' perspective or just different parts of the conversation, and we could just expand it that way. So again, go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, if you want to get involved, use the new Super Chat feature and let us know what you guys are thinking. And we have a question already. Anthony Manzano question: do you think it shows the incompetence at North Carolina with their administration and athletic department that they had to hire Bill Belichick, who has no coaching experience in college? That's a great question to start off the show. I wouldn't say incompetence. I think I think I would take it more on the positive side, just because this is like a once in a lifetime, sort of thing for a program like UNC, and the no experience at the college level is obviously a huge thing. That's why I kind of, came on here a couple days ago when we first heard about the news and said that I didn't think it was going to be a good fit considering where Bill Belichick was at this point in time, not only in his life but in his coaching career. How long was he truly going to be there, and was it going to match up with getting UNC to become a top program? That's why I didn't see it as a fit, kind of to what you're alluding to as well, with the lack of college experience. But I don't think it's just incompetence. I think it's just the idea of this once in a lifetime opportunity for them to bring in the knowledge, the expertise, the pedigree, the legacy that is Bill Belichick, to bring him in and have any sort of opportunity for him to be your coach or at least push you in the right direction. I think it would be more on the positive side in that regard, right? There's definitely, I'm not saying that there's not other candidates that definitely needed or deserve the opportunity who have, put in the time and effort at the college level, but I mean, it's Bill Belichick. There's not a lot of guys that just walk around with that sort of pedigree. Looking at it from the realistic perspective, do you think Bill Belichick is going to want to deal with trying to negotiate NIL contracts on the transfer portal? That's also another reason why I didn't think this was a good fit. And honestly, I don't think it's going to be him directly. I think he's going to get other people that are a lot more well-versed in that department to go ahead and handle that. I'm sure he's going to be involved with it, overlooking some things or maybe even being involved with a couple of them, but it's not going to be every single thing, every little tedious detail or every single, negotiation like that. I'm sure he's going to have a huge team that's going to be, looking over that while also taking in his input and, getting, his basis on things. So I think he's definitely going to require a lot of help from people that are more well versed in that. I'm sure he knows a decent amount, but like you said, it's definitely a whole, just a whole different area that Bill really hasn't dealt with as well. So I'm sure he's going to have a lot of people helping him out in that regard. So to answer really your question, I don't think he's going to want to do it or really deal with it. That's why he's going to have a lot more people of a bigger team to try and do it for him and kind of help him out along the way in an essence. So I will talk about it a little bit more. We have another question. Bill Belichick's best friend Saban retired from college football because of the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness. I'm predicting within a year and a half to 2 years he leaves. That's a possibility, and I'm sure I'm hoping that's something UNC considered here, because that's obviously a real possibility. I don't know off the top of my head how old Bill Belichick is, but it's still an area where it's still very new to a lot of people. It feels like it's been like a while now with how much everyone's talked about it, but for Nick Saban to retire and not really be a big fan of it, it does definitely hold some ground there. But again, I think Bill Belichick knew what he was getting into. I don't think he would ever accept the job or even consider it, honestly, if he didn't feel like he could do it, if he didn't feel like he could, overcome the NIL and the name, image, and likeness sort of thing. He knows that, college is a very different landscape now. There's a lot of people leaving. There's not a lot of program building or a lot of culture building, not in the majority of places. So if he doesn't know that, then, I don't think he really is suited for the job if he's inept at knowing, a lot about that stuff in that regard. But I feel like at this point, if you're really considering a job like this, you have to know, a lot about the name, image, and likeness and how crazy it is of a thing with the transfer portal and players not being loyal to a program like you would at the NFL level, right? With contracts locking you in essentially, right? You have to know that going in, or else you're really not going to have a lot of success going at it. And I have to give Bill Belichick the benefit of the doubt that he's going to be able to do it, or at least know that, all the troubles that come with that as well. But speaking on Bill Belichick now to kind of start off the thing, the show, I mean, it is a lot, but I think it is important to kind of mention, Bill Belichick's vision that he kind of had, and I thought it was pretty interesting how he kind of broke it down on the Pat McAfee show a couple days ago. He said, if I was in a college program, the college program would be a pipeline to the NFL for the players that had the ability to play in the NFL. It would be a professional program, training, nutrition, scheme, coaching technique that would transfer to the NFL. And that's pretty much his program pitch right there. That's what he's going to be trying to sell to every player, to anybody that's trying to be involved with UNC. And it is what top players, that's what top players go to, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. That's what they go there for, right? It's a pipeline to the NFL. That's where all the best talent plays. That's where the best organizations and, programs are to get to the next level. And, Bill Belichick going to, UNC, that's not at the same level as those programs. The thing that kind of keeps UNC in the competition is Bill Belichick, right? The guy that's been at the NFL level, the guy that's won multiple Super Bowls, that knows what it takes to get it done. So that's kind of how he's competing at this level with the big powerhouses of college football, right? Having that sort of prime time attraction, right? People gravitate towards Prime as a coach, right? Because he's been there. He knows what it takes. He can give you all that sort of experience and expertise where, you can get it at Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State with all the competition aspect and everything. But a direct voice in your ear, I think that is also attractive to players. And just on the idea of Bill going there and being the head coach, you're thinking, why would Bill want to do this and not just kind of wait it out for the NFL? Well, it is a possibility that NFL teams, are just really not that interested, which is kind of hard to believe at this point, because I do think he should be coaching in the NFL. But I think one thing that I started thinking about, pondering over this idea of like why would Bill want to go here? Like, what kind of benefit can he get of going to college, other than, I guess, just coaching again, right? If he can't wait for the NFL. And then I started thinking about this thought that the ultimate benefit from going to college over the NFL at this point is sort of that achievement you would have as a coach and as, a legend, adding to your already impressive resume, is that in an alternate universe sort of thing where Bill Belichick uplifts the program of UNC into a Colorado sort of way of bringing them to the national light, to the national recognition of where Colorado is now, obviously with their players, but also Coach Prime. If Bill Belichick was able to do something like that, and maybe in 2 years or something like that, or 3 years, get them in the college playoffs, get them to be one of the best teams in college football through this professional sort of mindset that he wants to bring. And if he's able to do that with a program like UNC that's not really regarded as one of the big powerhouses, I think that alone, as an accomplishment, as an achievement, would really be the ultimate, positive of going to college over the NFL. Because he could go to I don't know, like a bigger school, right? Like a more nationally recognized school, and try to win that way. But to kind of take this challenge on to a UNC that's always described as a basketball school, and if he's able to uplift their program in a football sort of way to a national recognized program that's considered one of the best in the country, I think that achievement would exceed, anything he would do in the NFL or anything he would do at some of the biggest college programs, right? Doing that, really building a program from scratch, from the ground up, to a national recognized program, I think is really the ultimate thing that he would get out of this at this point in time. Because everything else, I think it still just points to the NFL winning a Super Bowl, and getting back into the flow of things, right, that way. But if he's able to achieve that and really build UNC up from the ground up, then I think that would exceed a lot of any of the other options he might have out there. So, I mean, it's getting close. I'm not going to count it as official yet, even though it's probably 90-80% close, just because I want to see like an official like statement from UNC or something before I come on here and we start talking about things going forward. But it appears that it is very, very close to being done. So that's a way to start off the program. I didn't think it was going to be this early, but, this is where we are in regards to Bill Belichick. A lot of change coming to college football, it seems. And speaking about change, could there be a change at the quarterback position for the Atlanta Falcons? Is it time for them to move on to their first-round selection, Michael Penix, over the struggling Kirk Cousins? We're going to answer that when we return after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the Chip Shot Football Podcast here, where we're going to shift our focus over now to the NFL a little bit more and looking at the Atlanta Falcons and where they stand right now with about four games left on their schedule. I think Atlanta right now is sort of like free falling right now as we speak, because since the loss to the Saints, I didn't want to write too much into it. Because everybody drops one of those games where, you really should have won, like the Ravens losing to the Raiders. I'll say the Steelers losing to the Cowboys was one that I'm sure the Steelers would like to have back. And I'm trying to think of other games. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones that I'm just missing. Oh, the Lions losing at home to the Buccaneers. Not to say that the Bucs are bad, but on that day the Lions played really bad. So there's always those games where things just don't seem to be going your way for whatever reason. You drop that game on that day and it just wasn't for you to take. But ever since that moment, I didn't think it was going to be that bad because I saw that loss and I'm thinking, all right, they dropped this game. This is their one game where nothing went right. So we move on to next week, right? Then we get to Denver. That loss it wasn't surprising that they lost because Denver's defense is good, but losing 38-6 is pretty concerning, right? Because the Broncos, they're great. Their defense is great. Bo Nix is playing great, but they're in the first year of this thing. That was pretty concerning. For their offense especially, to only put up 6 points. And, it was sort of like the Seahawks game where they lost 34-14. That was pretty concerning as well. Then you had this loss on top of the Saints. But even still, all right, that was a really ugly, couple games. Let's just move on. But then every week we've waited for a sort of a response from the Falcons, and they continue to fall short. And I think that's sort of an understatement now that I'm reading it, because I think you begin to look at Kirk Cousins a little bit differently. An understatement, or for that statement to be accurate, I think it would be where it'd be high-scoring games and they've been unlucky, towards the end, which would be a problem in and of itself. But they're getting dominated, by the Broncos. They just got absolutely destroyed by the Vikings, Kirk Cousins' old team. And, for Kirk Cousins especially, there's a lot of pressure on him just because, he was brought in to be the missing piece for the Falcons, right? Last year was really bad with Marcus Mariota and Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder, all those guys. Very bad from a quarterback standpoint. So you bring in Kirk Cousins, you're taking a little bit of a risk there with the severe Achilles injury, but it is still Kirk Cousins, right? And the fact that they brought him in, they snatched him from Minnesota, and they gave him all that money. Great for Kirk Cousins to get that money, right? Obviously, but there comes, that expectation where you got to at least, give us better than what we've seen from Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, and Marcus Mariota in each in their day there with the Falcons. And I'm not saying Kirk's been that awful, but the last run of games, definitely makes you think back to that quarterback play, because Kirk, over the last 4 games in which they've lost, he's thrown 8 interceptions and 0 passing touchdowns in all of those losses. And because of the poor play, they went from leading the NFC South at 6-3 at one point. Now they're sitting at 6-7 and out of the playoffs completely if they ended today. If the regular season ended today. They did draft a guy, in the first round this year. Now for, I would say for any sort of medical emergency, or if Kirk, got hurt again, to fall under that category. We're obviously talking about Michael Penix, and now people start looking at him a little bit differently, right? I don't think he's been really ever mentioned at all this season, which is a little surprising to me. But, at this point in time now where things are sort of not going well at all, Kirk's playing the worst he's played all year, and you're in danger of missing the playoffs, which at least that's one thing that you thought you'd get this season, right? Even if you didn't go far, to make the playoffs and take that next step, that was really big for this team, especially because they haven't made the playoffs for some time now. So for this team to be in risk of losing that, I think the panic, the mayhem that might be going around not the organization, but the fan base and everybody around it, I think is warranted. So trying to find an answer, trying to avoid the ultimate, catastrophe of missing the playoffs and crashing out of it, you look for answers, and you start looking at Michael Penix a little bit differently, right? And it starts to become a real possibility that this could happen, potentially, right? I think, in my opinion, right now it is a little bit premature, but you can't avoid the fact that people are starting to kind of think think of it, right? Especially because Kirk, not only has the decision-making been a little bit spotty, but, you question the mobility, his physical capabilities. Is the injury bothering him in any way? Is it restricting him in any way? If it is, he shouldn't even be playing, right? If it's going to harm you this much, and it is a physical thing, he shouldn't even be playing. But if it's something else, then you got to reconsider it and talk it over, at that point. But Raheem Morris spoke about this yesterday to the media, and he said that Kirk is still the starting quarterback, and I would have to agree with that. Just because, like I said, I think it is still a bit premature, and, not only with that, with the fact that Kirk, isn't playing well, but like I mentioned, the decision-making is a little bit doubtful, I'll say. The double clutching, there's been a lot of double clutching. There's been a lot of hesitancy to maybe make some throws, maybe because he's thrown, that pick six in the Chargers game, that bad interception in the back of the end zone, again, against the Chargers, and there's just been a lot of mistakes. So you don't want it to get to a point also where he is double clutching a lot, and you're starting to question whether or not he's even trusting or has any confidence in some of the throws that he used to just let it rip. Now he's kind of about to throw it, then he's like kind of holding back, and now he's got to reset everything, and that really does nobody any good. So you don't want to see that, spiraling, right? But I don't think it's going to get to that just yet. And also the fact that if he does have, second thoughts, it's not like he could just take off and run, right? Because of those limitations, he's never been the most athletically, fast guy anyway, but now, especially after that injury, he's not really prone to just go and run. He'll get a couple yards if he absolutely has to, but it's not like he's a mobile quarterback, right? I don't think no one's describing him as a mobile quarterback. So there's that part of it, but also there's not been a lot of play action this year, which is a little surprising just because of the fact that, play action was a big thing for Kirk during his time there in Minnesota. He's got 0 passing touchdowns this year from play action passes, and he's on pace to only have 85 play action attempts this year, when that's been one of his biggest strengths, obviously going back to Minnesota and taking advantage of it with obviously Justin Jefferson and the kind of year that TJ Hawkinson had when Kirk Cousins was there. And now, the weapons are still great with Kyle and Drake London and Darnell Mooney, but for whatever reason, the play action really hasn't been there. So again, you have to question whether or not does he feel comfortable completely turning his back to a defense and, fully buying into play action, or is it something that just isn't included in the game plan, which I have other questions about, right? Knowing what kind of quarterback Kirk Cousins is and the kind of strengths that he brings, play action is one of the biggest ones. So for you to not even run it, that's pretty, suspect for serious questioning, right? Because you got to play to your player's strengths. So if you're not even doing that, then what are we talking about with this offense and Kirk Cousins, right? So that's something that's also pretty interesting with this whole situation with Kirk, especially, trying to figure out why he's hit this sort of rough patch here in his first year with Atlanta. But, you understand the panic and everything like that. But I think right now, everybody wants to talk about the contract and things like that anyway. But to bring in a young quarterback, a guy that's never really had NFL experience, and just basically say, okay, this expensive quarterback's not working for us. Maybe we just got to bring in the young kid and go up to Michael Penix and say, okay, now you have to bring us to the playoffs. Here, you start now, bring us to the playoffs, because this guy can't do it. We drafted you, so you have to go and do it, right? Especially with 4 games left, this is, quite frankly, one of the worst times to bring in a rookie quarterback, right? With so much on his plate, and for him to just step in for Kirk and be expected to kind of save the season are just so unrationally, so unrational to even comprehend how that could ever even work is obviously the problem, right? It's not the solution. I think too many bad things could happen with that scenario to outweigh any sort of positive. If he somehow gets you to the playoffs, I don't think, it might not be anything, that drastic, because at that point, I don't think they're going to make it past the first round anyway. So it would be an absolute, extra effort for Michael Penix to just walk in and make the playoffs with this team. So I think that's, one thing you have to consider. And also, don't make the change just because Kirk is playing poorly. Don't make the change just because Kirk isn't satisfying the needs, because you have to feel confident about Michael Penix starting. Don't just think Kirk is bad, so let's get him to the bench and just bring in Michael Penix, even if we're not confident in him, right? You got to feel good that what you've seen from Michael Penix in practices, in maybe running with the ones a little bit, that, okay, if Kirk doesn't get this thing turned around, or maybe Michael is really blowing us away with his performances in practice, maybe then we could bring him in. But don't just bring him in because Kirk isn't doing well, right? Because that does nobody any good. And again, I don't think it'll even help, because it's one thing to kind of step in there to a whole new environment in the NFL. The speed at the beginning of the season from the NFL to college is one thing. The speed from college to right now when they're in playoff mode is one of the most impossible things to just step into, right? It's not going to work. And also, the Falcons defense hasn't been great. To have a rookie quarterback succeed, you have to have a running game, which the Falcons do have, but the defense isn't really complementing the offense anyway. So if Michael Penix has to go out there and put up 20 plus, 25 plus points, it's not going to help anybody, because then the defense is getting torched and Michael Penix is doing too much, right? Trying to be the hero in some instances. So that does nobody any good either. So, I mean, right now, I think it definitely looks bad, obviously, but I think you could only make things worse for your future if you bring in Michael Penix right now to kind of try and solve everything in the short term. If you end up missing the playoffs, that's definitely going to sting, and that's definitely going to be a huge, problem for this organization, right? Because then you question a bunch of decisions that they've made. But I mean, I don't know. I don't want to bring him in right now. This upcoming game against the Raiders is definitely going to be bigger than originally anticipated, but this is a good opportunity for the Falcons to go out there, kind of beat up on a Raiders team that's trying to get Shedeur Sanders anyway. So this would be a good opportunity for them to go out there, get another win, and try to stop the bleeding a little bit. But in that same instance, if they lose this game, there might not be any other option, right? It might just be all hands on deck and nothing really matters, right? And it could be, I don't want to say it or kind of like put it out there, but unfortunately it could be a last-ditch effort to kind of save your job if you're a coach or an executive or something like that. And that's the part of the game, the part of football where you don't want to see it happen, where a guy's trying to save his job, so he brings in the rookie to kind of try and save it, knowing that it could turn out very poorly, but it doesn't matter because he's going to be out of a job anyway. That's the absolute last thing that you want to happen. So I don't think it'll get to that, but, I had to mention it because it could be a possibility at some point, only if they lose to the Raiders, right? Because then at that point it would be very bad. But, who knows what it'll get to. I expect them to beat the Raiders, so I don't think we're going to have to get to that scenario. But in the meantime, we're going to move on and kind of take a break from the actual game of football and talking about things on the field, and we're going to talk about Hard Knocks again. Episode 2 dropped yesterday, and we're going to give our reactions to it, what we saw from the Browns, the Bengals, the Ravens a little bit, and the Steelers as well in Episode 2. So we'll be right back with that right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
jumping back in here to the show now and looking at the second episode of Hard Knocks that dropped yesterday. I wanted to keep talking about this just because it's such an interesting, like, project that the NFL is doing, I guess, with an in-season version of Hard Knocks, just because, one, they've never really focused in on a whole division like this, and I think it's a great idea, obviously, because of the fact that you have so many things to kind of keep track of, how, one organization handles things compared to another one, and maybe, one's doing very good, like the Steelers and the Ravens, and the other two, like the Bengals and the Browns, are having one of the roughest years in the NFL. So you get all these different sort of reactions, personalities, responses to adversity, and different things that they go through, on the day-to-day that you don't obviously get to see from the outside looking in. And I think that's this is one of the coolest projects that the NFL has done in recent memory. I've never really tuned into Hard Knocks, but now that it's a whole division, especially the AFC North, I had to tune in, and I've been very, very satisfied with what I've seen. The first episode I thought dealt a lot with the Steelers because, the Steelers aren't really a team that gets selected for this sort of thing. They've never actually been on Hard Knocks before. So I thought the first episode did a lot on them, getting people that might not be so familiar with the Steelers and Mike Tomlin really good understanding of what he is as a coach, and with some cool experiences as well in that first episode. But the second episode that dropped yesterday, I thought had a lot more to do with how, focusing in on each team, getting each team their own, little moment, their own spotlight on how the coaches, handle things in different ways, how they prepare, the motivational part of it, how there's different ways that, Kevin Stefanski, showed leadership, to how Zach Taylor did, to obviously Mike Tomlin, and they did it in different ways. You didn't see a lot of Baltimore, really, because they're on their bye week, so you only really got, like, one moment with them before they went their separate ways for their own, things that they had going on time away or anything like that. They had a meeting there, and, they got this one moment, and, basically John Harbaugh was addressing the team to just let them know that, get your mindset right, getting the full feel of the landscape before the official bye week started, and just basically telling them that to get their minds right, to get their physicality right, and then just to get right spiritually as well, because one of the quotes he said was that they had an 8-game season going forward from this point on. And I thought that was a pretty cool moment, just because, one, you didn't see too much of them, but also I thought it was a cool message, just because, having a bye week, this late, and really gearing up for the latter portion of the season, and not only the regular season, but also the playoffs, obviously, with their aspirations. I thought that was a pretty cool message to just kind of, not forget the first part before the bye week, but to understand that that's already done and dealt with. You can't go back and change it, to now look forward, because the next 8 games is going to be a whole different season on its own. So just to get right, come back with a new mindset to just attack the rest of the games, I thought was pretty cool. And, just seeing John Harbaugh, orchestrate that message was also pretty interesting to see. But similarly, in the same way, kind of to that, we saw with the Pittsburgh Steelers and some more of Mike Tomlin. And some of the things I took away from it that I thought were pretty cool was the fact that, just a simple meeting early in the week before, they really got into the whole thing with the entire team. The Mike Tomlin had a meeting with, it seemed like, the captains or the leaders of the group, with, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, all 3 quarterbacks were there, and Cam Hayward might have been there, but he might not have been. It might just have been the offense. But even seeing that was pretty cool, right? And the kind of message that he, tried to express to them, how, all these divisional games are about physicality and execution, not to focus on anything like style points or anything like that. Basically just reaffirming the message that comes with playing in the NFC North and playing against these teams twice a year, and especially a team that beat them, the first time around. I thought even seeing that meeting was pretty cool, and also the way he set up the game plan with Myles Garrett was kind of funny. He had a pretty funny graphic up there for the meeting, so that was pretty cool to just keep it lighthearted, but also to really hammer the point home to the rest of the team that this guy ruined the game for us the first time around. So how did they try and avoid that? Obviously, was pretty interesting to see. Also, the wide receivers, it was a pretty big point, obviously, in this episode with George Pickens being, out with the injury. So we got to see a little bit of the Steelers wide receiver coach, Zach Azzani, and, during his meeting, telling his guys to be prepared in case George can't go, and, to just be on their game. If George Pickens wasn't able to go, which he wasn't, how they were able to still be prepared. And it was cool to see it kind of play out that way on the field, right? With them kind of preparing for it in that scene that we saw. And then on Sunday, seeing how well Van Jefferson played, Ben Skoranek played, not on offense really, but on the special team side of things. Calvin Austin made a couple plays. Pat Freiermuth made some plays. Mike Williams had a big catch. All those guys where you see it in the meeting, a couple days after, and then you kind of go back to it and think, wow, like, he said that message, and then on Sunday they sort of executed it. That's the part of it where I think connecting the dots like that really makes a series like this pretty cool. And then one of the coolest parts of it, I keep saying it because it was also fascinating, because, this moment with Joey Porter Jr., even with him and Mike Tomlin, after Porter had 6 penalties against Cincinnati, him and Mike Tomlin had a pretty riveting conversation during just practice, just kind of like before everything got started, and how Mike Tomlin just essentially came up to him knowing, about the penalties obviously and whatnot, and how that could be a struggle, just basically going up to him and reaffirming it, and basically just giving him the message that there's going to be these sort of bad moments as you have this great career. And Joey Porter mentioned how he wanted to be great, right? That he wants to be great ultimately, and Mike Tomlin just basically gave him the message that, greatness takes time. It's a process, right? It's not this sudden thing where you obviously want it, but it's not going to happen in year 2, especially. You're going to have rough moments like this. So to see him give him that message, and Joey not only receive it, but afterwards you see him working one-on-one with his defensive back coach and having a better game against the Cleveland Browns on Sunday. It's that connection, again, where you see the conversation, the work being put in, and then improving on Sundays is where really I think this series really hits it on the head. So that's what I took away from the Steelers' point of it. Then you get to Kevin Stefanski, and I thought his was pretty interesting just because the Browns are having a really bad year, obviously, right, with Deshaun, and the record obviously speaks for itself, right? But I like how Stefanski was, the way he communicated with Jameis Winston especially, and the rest of his team, I thought was super cool. He's a super positive guy and just supportive of Jameis Winston. The little interactions that they have in practice, during the game. Also, the trust that he showed in that Denver game was also, great to see, just because at one point where Jameis had, he just crossed over 400 yards, and basically Kevin Stefanski said in his headset, Jameis Winston's balling right now, essentially. Let's make sure to give him the ball as much as possible. And, that sort of confidence where, again, the season's not going great, obviously, but to still have that belief in your players was awesome to see from him. Even if the Denver game didn't go well, to see that from him was cool. And he showed his offensive line a clip during the meetings after the game, and he kind of made it like a lighthearted joke where Jameis threw the interception, and he showed how each offensive lineman hit their top speed of the entire season trying to tackle the guy that intercepted the ball. And I thought that was a cool message too, just essentially showing them that, the play didn't go well, obviously, but the fact that they cared so much to show that sort of effort on that play kind of reassessed everything and brought everybody together in a moment where, it didn't go our way, but the fact that you guys are still sticking together was awesome to see. And it just speaks to the kind of leader, right? To keep everybody together and still motivated was not only him, but it trickulated to other parts of his team, with the defensive line coach also, letting the senior players talk a little bit during his meeting, and Myles Garrett giving some advice to the group, and Shelby Harris also. I thought his little speech there during their meeting was pretty honest and true, where he mentioned how you got to find your own motivation in this thing, and how some of the players aren't going to be back next year. So you're essentially playing to show all the teams, what kind of player you are, and kind of help yourself going forward, even if it's not on the Bengals. So that kept it pretty honest in that moment. So that was also interesting to see. And then once we get to the Bengals, arguably the best part of this episode was with Zach Taylor, similar to Kevin Stefanski, saying that, it's not been the kind of season that we've wanted. We obviously wanted to win the Steelers game, but he mentioned early in the episode how the biggest motivation for him would be after the Dallas game, being in that post-game locker room after a victory. He wanted to have that feeling again. He wanted to be in that moment, celebrating with his team once again. That's what was keeping him motivated. So for him to kind of start off the episode with that, and then at the end of the episode, see the Bengals obviously beat the Cowboys, and that be the ending scene with the team celebrating and basically Zach Taylor manifesting it all. I thought that was the coolest part of the entire show, where Zach Taylor's keeping his guys motivated and manifesting this sort of little wins that they have at certain points of the season, where they get a win like this, and they technically keep their playoff hopes alive, but it just a win in general did this group a lot of good. So those were only a few of the things. I could have talked a lot about other parts, the more personal parts with Jameis Winston and his family, TJ Watt and his family as well. They talked about the history of the Pittsburgh and Cleveland rivalry, which was pretty cool. Joey Porter Sr. talked about it. Jamar Chase had a nice moment there with a Bengals fan that had survived cancer, Brixton Wood, and their interactions was also awesome to see. So there's a lot more things that I could have talked about, but those were the biggest talking points in my opinion. Just looking at how each coach approached, his job. It's all the same job, right? Head coach, but how each of them brought something different to the table was pretty neat to see at the end of the day. And I'm going to just keep watching, obviously, because I'm completely hooked. I'm definitely going to keep tuning in. But for us on this show, we're going to get to a couple more topics here. We got, on the topic of the AFC North, we got the Steelers coming up, and their next 4 games are some of the toughest games that any team has faced in the NFL, just consecutively. So we're going to talk about that and what we think the Steelers' record will be after their last 4 games here of the regular season. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping back now into it is something that at this point in time where with the Steelers looking at the idea that they play the Eagles on the 15th, then they play the Ravens on the 21st, which is a Saturday, and already that kind of throws off the week, right? That it's a Saturday and you're not playing on a Sunday, so you have to adjust the training and everything like that. So that throws some things off already. But then after you play a Saturday game, then you look at the next 4 days where you play again on a Wednesday, and then you're really thrown off right at that point where you're playing in the middle of the week where guys are taking rest days usually. Now you're forced to go out there and play. It might not seem like a big deal for anybody that's not really played before, but it's, you have to think that these players are such, creatures of habit, obviously, for that to be thrown in there as a bit of a wrench, in this whole thing has to affect all these players in a different way. So that just adds on to the level of difficulty, obviously, other than playing the Chiefs, who are one of the best teams in the NFL. And, of course, all considered top 5 teams in the NFL, the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Ravens, and even the Bengals are a top 3 offense, you could say. But, Pittsburgh is also trying to be included in that conversation, and I think that's the biggest thing, right? They're trying to knock off essentially the Bills for the number 2 seed in the playoffs as well, because both of them are 10-3 right now, but the Bills have a much more easier finish to 2024 than the Steelers do. I think they play the Patriots twice. They play the Lions this week, and they might play the Jets one more time. But, all those teams except the Lions are near, top 5, top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So they're going to have an easier path to secure the number 2 seed. So that's also something that the Steelers are trying to do and trying to accomplish this year, obviously, now that this door is open for them, right? With the loss of the Bills last week and the Steelers winning another game. So already tough enough, but the status of George Pickens is also something to kind of bring up here, just because it's really up in the air right now. After he missed the Cleveland game with that hamstring injury, Mike Tomlin spoke yesterday about how he views George Pickens as doubtful going into this Eagles game, that if he was forced to give an answer, he would probably say that George was not going to be able to make it. So that's obviously not great going up against the Eagles. And, not only that, but a hamstring injury is pretty tricky, overall, because, A.J. Brown had a hamstring injury, and, he's the one receiver that pops into my mind in this, in this thought, where he missed like 3 games, and, each hamstring injury is different. I'm pretty sure Nick Herbig missed like at least 3 games, if not 2, with his own hamstring injury. So it's a weird spot where it's such a tricky injury that you could come back maybe potentially the week after against the Ravens, but you don't want to risk it. So are they going to hold him off even longer? But can you also afford to lose those games? I know they don't want to just throw him out there, because if he's hurt, he does him no good. But, these are important games where, winning them would be huge. And, of course, you're going to want to have all your best players there. But that definitely throws a major problem in the operation for the Steelers, because even though they beat the Browns, and the Browns are a pretty decent team defensively, it's a different conversation when you're talking about the Eagles and how well their defense is playing, and the fact that the Steelers are going to have to put up points without their best player, their most talented player, I should say. It's an uphill battle, one that looks almost too steep to climb without George Pickens. So that's also something that we have to throw in there. And without George Pickens, I don't know if they even beat Kansas City or Baltimore. Definitely not Philly, because they're playing the best out of all 4 of those teams. So if you're not going to have George, I don't really think they're going to beat the Eagles. And they have a very talented roster. So to have your most talented player not be there is definitely a huge problem. And, looking at the Eagles, and the kind of things that you have to deal with each of these teams, right? The Eagles bring in a great defensive line with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Malik Williams, I believe is his name, and Josh Sweat and Nolan Smith also continuing to improve. Zach Bond has been a great player, and Kobe Dean at linebacker, both of them have been great. Then in the secondary, right, the Steelers are very familiar with Quinyon Mitchell. He was at the Senior Bowl, and he was seen with Mike Tomlin. Very, very friendly interaction with them, and I'm sure they got to know each other very well. So, they're very familiar with him and how great he's been this year. Plus, Darius Slay goes without saying. Also, we haven't even gone to the offense, right? Dealing with Saquon and AJ and Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith and an offensive line that is arguably one of the best in the NFL. And then not only that game, but the Ravens and how it's a divisional game. They have a bad pass defense, but you don't want to help them out and have them be in situations where they're not really worried about any of your receivers, so they can stack the box even more, bring in more pressure to Russell Wilson, and then your offense isn't really getting anything going. And they already kind of struggled in the first game. I don't even think they scored a touchdown, right? It was all Chris Boswell, so that was with George Pickens. So could you imagine not even having him, what the score could be? That's a real problem, right? Obviously dealing with that, and they have a lot of offensive talent as well on their own, so you're not really going to be able to match it if George Pickens isn't there. Then you look at the Chiefs, right? And you're going to need 7 points. You're going to need touchdowns to beat that team, right? And for a defense that wouldn't have George Pickens to worry about, you can guarantee that Steve Spagnuolo is going to blitz the Steelers to death if George Pickens is not on the field. He's going to send like eight guys at least at Russell Wilson and at that offensive line, and see if Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin can beat you one-on-one. And if they can't, then the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have a great day that day, controlling the pace of the game with the Steelers offense suffering. And even though I think the Steelers defense can do a very good job against this offense for the Chiefs that hasn't really been themselves, you can only give Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid so much time before they eventually, get something going. You're not going to hold them really to like 10 points. So, you can only give them that much time before they start to get going. And if you can't have an answer, that's also obviously a major problem. And you can say a similar thing to Cincinnati where, you needed a lot of points in the first game. So you're going to probably need a lot of points in the next time you play. And even though their defense is bad, same thing with the Ravens pass defense, right? It's going to look a lot better if they're not, having guys over the top, if they're playing everybody a lot closer. You're going to struggle a lot more. So the next couple of games were always going to be tough, right? It was never going to just be a cakewalk just because George was going to play. But now that Pickens is injured, and it is a hamstring injury of all injuries, you don't really know what the status of each game is going to be because you don't know when he's going to come back. So to me, if I was going to predict a record over these next 4 games, I would probably say, because I'm anticipating George to come back relatively soon, I don't think he's going to play. I don't think he's going to play against the Eagles just based on what everybody's saying. So because of that, I think they're going to lose to the Eagles. Against the Ravens, George might not play. It's going to be close, but I don't know. I would find it very hard to believe that the Ravens get swept again by the Steelers. Lamar hasn't been great against them, but you would have to really convince me. And really, I'd have to see it, because if I don't see it, I can't believe it. So I'm going to think the Steelers are going to lose to the Ravens after the Eagles. And then at that point, I'm expecting George to come back. And with George, I think the Steelers can beat the Chiefs. I really do. With having George there, if he's close to 100%, then throwing him out there, having him do his thing, and the way Russ is playing, I believe they can beat the Chiefs, especially because they're having trouble with their offensive line. So I think that could be a game where they could win in the most unlikely of scenarios, right? After losing the 2 previous games and then going out there and defeating the Chiefs. And then at that point, after beating the Chiefs, I know they can beat the Bengals again. So I'm saying 2-2. I think the Steelers are going to go 2-2 over the next 4 games. Hopefully George comes back when I kind of predicted, but we'll see. We're definitely going to see how good this defense really is against the Eagles and Saquon and Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And also, we're going to see how good this offense is without George Pickens? Is Mike Williams going to play a lot more to kind of validate that trade? Is the running game with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren really just going to take over games? Or are they going to be able to do that with a young offensive line? We're going to learn a lot about the Steelers over the next 4 games, with or without George Pickens, right? These games were always going to be the toughest part of their schedule. So we shall see where the Steelers land in the playoffs, depending on how they do over these next 4 games. But we have one more segment to get to on today's show. We're going to preview one of the best games, I think, of the Week 15 slate. The Bills taking on the Detroit Lions. Could this be a potential Super Bowl preview? We're going to answer that and also just kind of break it down as we usually do on our preview. So we'll be right back with that after this break. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. And in this last segment, we're going to preview Week 15 a little bit before we do it a lot, over the next couple days leading into the weekend. But I had to talk about this game in particular. The Bills and the Detroit Lions will be on our TV this upcoming Sunday. We could be seeing a Super Bowl preview this week when Buffalo travels to Detroit to try and stop the powerhouse that is the Detroit Lions, to kind of show the rarity in this matchup a little bit, because we're looking at 2 teams that combined, the Bills with 10 wins and the Detroit Lions with 12 wins. We're looking at 22 wins and 4 losses right now between just both of these teams. And to show the rarity, not only in this matchup, but with the Steelers and Eagles also playing, that's the along with the Steelers and Eagles game, the last time the NFL had 2 different games with teams matching up with double-digit wins like this in Week 15 or earlier was back in 1985. So the rarity of seeing, the level of these 2 games and the level of both of the teams playing in both games is super rare, obviously, because it hasn't happened in 45 years or something like that. So this weekend is obviously going to be, rare in that aspect, but also we should be treated to some high caliber football, hopefully, in both of these games. Both of them, I think, are set to kick off at around 4:30, so that's a bit unfortunate that you're going to have to switch between games. But regardless of it, in this matchup with the Bills and Detroit, right, looking at the Lions, they enter with a 12-1 record, and they're on an 11-game winning streak, which is the longest right now currently in the NFL, after getting a huge victory over the Green Bay Packers back on Thursday. They had their mini bye in the meantime since then, so they should be well rested for hosting the Buffalo Bills this upcoming Sunday. But for the Bills, on that side of things, the Bills, because they had their winning streak snapped last week in that loss to the Ravens, now they enter with a 10-3 record, and with the Steelers also at 10-3, they're kind of battling for that number 2 overall seed, even though the Buffalo Bills definitely have a much easier path to that number 2 seed than the Steelers do, just based on who they play. But it is a bit unfortunate also just because the Bills mentioned how after it it was after the 49ers game where they won the division that they kind of put it out there that they wanted to get the number 1 seed. So the fact that they lost and that makes it a lot more difficult does put a damper on things, but still, you got to get the number 2 at least now, right? If you're the Bills, you can't be also giving that up to a Steelers team that has the toughest ending of the regular season out of anybody in the NFL. So it's set up for you to take the number 2 seed. So the Bills are definitely going to try and, help their cause with a win, hopefully in Detroit this upcoming Sunday. But the main thing that stands out with both of these teams, 2 of the most complete teams in the NFL, but the thing that stands out the most is the kind of offense that we're going to get from both of these teams, hopefully, right? Because both teams, if you look at them on the season, both of them are top 10 in total yards on offense this year. The Lions are in second, while the Bills are 10th in the NFL in that category. Also, both teams are top 2 in scoring as well. The Lions lead everybody with 32 points per game, and the Bills are right behind them, averaging 30 points per game. So, they obviously have no problem scoring points, right? And I'm anticipating something similar to what we saw in the Rams and Bills game, right? Just because the Rams have all the weapons in the world. So that was a high-scoring game, and both of these defenses aren't really 2 of the greatest right now as we speak, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But more so on the offense, right? You look at Josh Allen and Jared Goff, the 2 quarterbacks in this matchup. One's 5th and one is 6th in passing touchdowns this year. Allen is coming off of a 6-touchdown game last week against the Rams, but it wasn't enough. But even still, that's a crazy thing to do. To be accounting for 6 touchdowns is insane for just one player. Jared Goff has been extremely accurate, extremely efficient this year. At one point, I forget what the stat was. It was like he had more passing touchdowns or more completions than, or he had like more wins or more passing touchdowns than he had incompletions at one point in this year, which it was something like that. It was just nuts to even, comprehend, at least for me. But, he's been awesome. He was in the MVP conversation a little bit before that 5 interception performance, even though they won. Jared's not winning an MVP because of that. So, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. And then you have, obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery both hitting double-digit, touchdowns on the year so far, and how unstoppable, really, I think is the appropriate word to use for how both of them have looked this year, not only individually, but complementing each other as well. That's obviously a huge help for them. And then you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's number 2 in the NFL in receiving touchdowns with 9, only behind Jamar Chase, and he's 4th in the NFL currently as well in reception. So clearly the go-to guy for Jared Goff, along with Sam Laporta and Jameson Williams and Tim Patrick also, a big target like that. He's really gained the trust of Jared Goff recently. So all those guys, just offense on in this game. I haven't even mentioned James Cook, Khalil Shakir on the other side for the Bills, and also Amari Cooper, right? They're all, in this conversation of supporting the idea that we could be in for a high-scoring game here in Detroit on Sunday. But not only are we going to see great football on the field, but also I think it makes it even better because there's some high stakes in this game as well, with the Lions trying to stay in that number 1 spot in the NFC. Even though this is a tough game, and the Eagles also play a tough game, that's who really they're competing with for the number 1 seed, and also the Vikings, I guess you can throw in there as well. But the Lions, it's not really a cakewalk because they have to play obviously the Bills, and then they got to play the 49ers after this, and then they still got to play the Vikings. So those aren't easy games where you're just going to roll over and steamroll all those teams. If you lose 2 of those, and the Eagles, who have a much more favorable schedule, don't lose another game, you could play yourself out of the number 1 seed. So there's still a lot to play for the Lions here, obviously. I mentioned it before how it feels like the Lions just beat up everybody and then just keep going. on their path. But even if they are looking so dominant, I don't think it's just a foregone conclusion that they're just get the number one seed, because they still got to play a lot of tough teams. And same thing for the I guess you could say the same thing for the Bills, right? Because we talked about the number 2 seed and making sure you lock that up. You don't want to lose this game and, be in a situation, I don't know. I mean, I don't think the Steelers are going to win 3 out of their next 4, but it is a possibility, albeit low possibility. It's still a possibility. So if you lose this game and say the Steelers win the next 3 and maybe lose one more, and the you put yourself in a much more troubling scenario than you would have to trying to get that number 2 seed. So the Bills definitely want to go out there and try to win this game, especially because of the way they lost last week too. I'm sure they felt like they need to make up for that. So what better way to do it than beating the best team in the NFC, in my opinion. So that's kind of an overview of this matchup a little bit. But now getting into the matchups there, looking at the first one I have on here and what's going to help determine this game is going to be the Detroit running game with Sonic and Knuckles going up against the Buffalo Bills run defense, where the Rams, and I thought Kyron Williams and even Blake Corum had a very efficient day. I forget the total rushing yards, but Kyron had a pretty decent day, and Blake Corum also spotting him as well. And I think you elevate it now going up to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, because, Corum is still a rookie. He's still like getting used to everything, so he can't really take advantage of having like a 2 running back sort of operation, whereas the Lions, they thrive off of that, right? That's one of their MOs. So can we see a better effort from the Bills? Are they going to be able to stop the run game this time? Or if we see anything close to what we saw last week against Kyron and even Blake Corum, the Bills are going to have their way with that defense. So that's one of the matchups. Then also looking at Buffalo's passing defense against all the weapons that Detroit has, because as suspect as the Bills' run defense was, the passing defense wasn't much better, because Puka Nacua had one of, if not the best game of this year that he's on right now, of his second year. He completely destroyed the zones, the man coverage, all the blitzes that they tried never really got there. And not only that, but you had Cooper Kupp doing his thing. And you really had just the offensive weapons for the Rams in the last game really show out. And now in this game, it's not that much different, because you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I said, Sam Laporta, Tim Patrick, who's a big body, Jameson Williams, who could take the roof off of your defense. So you have to worry still about a lot of different guys, and the way Ben Johnson operates that whole thing and, manipulates the offense, right? It doesn't fill me with too much confidence that the Bills are going to be able to stop that, or I'd be interested to see how they think they're going to stop it, what kind of things that they'll do differently. It does intrigue me, but I don't think that's a good matchup for them either. And then the last one is going to be Joe Brady against Aaron Glenn. Probably not the guys you were thinking I was going to mention, but those are 2 head coaching candidates. And I'm very interested to see how Joe Brady just uses Josh Allen in this game. How, especially after coming off of a 6-touchdown game, and really, I don't think he could play that much better at all. How much better can you get than 6 touchdowns, right? But, how Joe Brady puts a game plan together around Josh Allen to get the win ultimately, and how he uses him in the running game, the passing game, and everything like that. I think a lot of it comes down to Joe Brady and, putting out a game plan for them. While also, in that same conversation, Aaron Glenn is going to have to try and stop Josh Allen, and I'm interested to see how he tries to do that, right? Is he going to bring pressure? Is it going to be zone? Last week against the Packers, things didn't go too well. The defense really struggled, and now you bring it up to the highest level against Josh Allen. So, it'll be interesting to see how and what Aaron Glenn does to kind of slow down Josh Allen a little bit as well. But in terms of predictions, I'm going to go with the Lions to win this game, because I know that Buffalo's defense definitely scares me, and they don't have like a shutdown corner or the run defense, again, just wasn't very good against the Rams on the road. So if I think that they're going to go on the road and play like tremendously better, I think that's overestimating it. So the fact that they got to play Jameer and David Montgomery, while also they have like Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, and James Cook that did their thing, but I think this is an operation that they really haven't seen that much this year outside of maybe Baltimore with the kind of running offense that they have. So they got destroyed in that game as well. And I don't think this matchup really suits them in that regard. And then if you want to bring like 9 guys down there, they got Amon-Ra St. Brown that could win on one-on-one. Sam Laporta can win on one-on-one. Jameson Williams can just run right by you. And Tim Patrick has a huge catch radius around him. So they got the guys to kind of attack any sort of scenario. Then also, Buffalo's offense and Allen, they're scoring at will. But, with defense, with the Lions defense also struggling, I'm expecting Josh Allen to have a pretty decent day. But I just don't know if his defense can provide 1 or 2 stops in this game where they're going to need to stop Detroit. So I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on Josh to kind of be Superman again in this game. And I just feel like the Bills defense doesn't really have an answer for all the weapons that the Lions are going to throw at them, and also just trying to keep up with the Lions, essentially. I think it's going to be very difficult for them. And the fact that they got to play on the road again, right? It was Los Angeles, now they got to go to Detroit, Michigan. It's a lot. So I think the Lions are going to win. I'm feeling pretty confident that they will get the job done in that game. But for us and the show, that is everything that we're going to cover on today's episode. I want to thank you guys for joining me. And please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the Chip Shot Football Podcast, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to catch more of this show, check out both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel, for more NFL coverage and more content surrounding the Chip Shot Football Podcast as well. I've been your host, Manny Maradiaga. Join me again tomorrow, same time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, to start looking ahead to Week 15 in the NFL.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't